Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah ta'ala, before we begin, I'll just do a bit of trivia, and we've got some treats for people to give away, inshallah ta'ala. First question from last week, we talked about in Surah Sajda, 2 pillars of imama. 2 pillars of imama. What were the 2 pillars of imama? For some sweet potato crisps. Yes? Yaqeen and sabr, mashallah. Very good. Amazing. Amazing. What were the 5 things that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows? Okay, yes?
You've got the hour.
Yeah?
Where you will die.
Yes?
The what is in the womb.
What is in the womb?
And then you've got
They're like, shh, don't help him.
rizq for the following day.
Yes, what they've earned in the following day, yeah?
Following day.
Last one. Last one.
Yeah. Maybe someone can help me out.
Okay, you get a chocolate for that one, definitely. Okay, and you get 4 actually, because you got 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now, okay, what was the other one? The rain, mashallah, mashallah. The rain, where is it going to rain? Don't you remember the video I showed? I showed the whole video about the rain cycle. Remember?
That was close.
That was close. Okay, very good. Alhamdulillah. We're going to have a stream of thoughts from Surah Saba, Fatir, Yasin, and Safat. And for those who've seen the marketing messaging that's been going out, there's been these revelations in the latest Epstein files that have been released that have been very disturbing, in fact, like more disturbing than you can think that they could possibly be from here. And how deep this goes is actually something that's quite consequential and actually quite connected to a stream of Quranic discourse that spans actually the entire Quran. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to follow along this stream as we go from surah to surah and just highlight this one particular theme. And inshallah ta'ala, if that takes us the whole class, it takes us the whole class. If not, we'll take some other benefit from the surah as well, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So, we start with Surah Saba. Surah Saba. Surah Saba Surah Saba, as you'll see in your books, life after death is a reality, so be grateful to your forgiving Lord. There's this theme of gratitude in Surah Saba. Saba, of course, refers to what? What does Saba refer to? Yes?
The city where the twin goddess was.
It's amazing, mashallah. You're incredible. Allahu Akbar. You're answering all the questions in junior and here as well. Alhamdulillah. Bismillah. There you go. Saba was the name of a civilization in southern Arabia, modern day Yemen. And it was a civilization that was there, and there was basically a dam, and there was great vegetation and everything like this that was there. And essentially, there was a flood that occurred, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them because they were ungrateful to their Lord. And so this is Saba. And so Saba, even the name, comes from that idea of the importance of showing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now there wasn't a prophet sent to Saba. This was just the people themselves being ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Surah Saba mentions as well the story of Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam. Dawood very briefly and Sulaiman alayhi salam afterwards as well. Sulaiman alayhi salam's story spans many surahs. Surah Baqarah mentions it, or you guys tell me which surahs? I already mentioned one. Which surahs mention Sulaiman alayhi salam's story?
No.
Surah Namal, very good. Yeah. Surah Saba. See, Haris always goes for the low-hanging fruit, mashallah. Any other surahs that mention Sulaiman alayhi salam?
Surah Baqarah.
Surah Baqarah already said. Nice try. That's cheating, not going over the... No, I'm just kidding. Yes. Surah Sad, very good. Amazing, mashallah. Okay, so this is where the story begins. Dawood alayhi salam is the king of the Bani Israel. And this kingdom took some time to establish because of the back and forth with the Bani Israel and their prophets. Musa alayhi salam was not able to see the promised land after they were saved from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from Fir'aun, and they wandered through the deserts. And then Musa alayhi salam's successor, who was Musa alayhi salam's successor? No, that was his partner, yes. Yusha bin Nun, very good. Too much sugar for you, brother. Yusha bin Nun, Yusha or Joshua, and he was the one that actually goes and starts to gain the land of Palestine for the believers. Now, this continues, and there are indigenous people that are there, the Canaanites they're known as, and they were idol worshippers, they were pagans. And as the interaction started to occur between the Bani Israel and them, they started to get influenced by the polytheism of the Canaanites. Why? Because they would devote themselves to different idols, and they would see this land full of fertile land and fruits that are growing and lush gardens. And after wandering the desert for years and decades, they're seeing this here and they're associating it with them worshiping these other gods. They were always pulled and attracted to basically adopting these idols alongside worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So who was the first idol the Bani Israel started to worship after? Someone from the sisters. From when they were saved from Fir'aun. Sorry? Hajar. Very good, Ajal. The cow, the golden cow. Very good. Alhamdulillah. The golden calf. That was the first idol. And then after that, there were others as well in this kind of exchange with the Canaanites that were there. Eventually, they take over that land, and most of them basically are either killed in war or they remain. And so the first real kingdom that unified the people was the kingdom of Dawood alayhi salam. And Dawood alayhi salam is established as king in that region. And the Bible mentions different aspects in terms of the how far Sulaiman alayhi salam's kingdom went. We don't know if these details are accurate, and there's not mentioned anything in our sources. So Dawood alayhi salam's kingdom is there. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it here. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ مِنَّا فَضْلًا. Verily we gave to Dawood from us fadl, bounty. يَا جِبَالُ أَوِّبِي مَعَهُ وَالطَّيْرُ وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ. O mountains, repeat or chant or echo his dhikr, his tasbih, and the birds as well, So this is what type of blessing is this? This is a spiritual blessing, right? His worship and the fact that other people, the creation around him are echoing it. It's a miracle. So this is a spiritual blessing. The next thing mentioned afterwards though, وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ. It seems like a bit like, wait, they're chanting and there's birds and then all of a sudden there's iron. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing forth the two types of fadl. There is the dini fadl, which is guidance and hidayah, being guided for ibadah. And then there is the technological fadl, the advancement of technology. Because this didn't just mention dunya, this mentioned advancement of technology. وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ. We made iron moldable for him. And this is describing a very important step in technology, in human technology. And as the ayah continues, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the detail of this technology. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually has commanded and inspired him, أَنِعْمَلْ سَابِغَاتٍ وَقَدِّرْ فِي السَّرْدِ. Make full-length armor, sabighat, like it should flow. Make full-length armor. وَقَدِّرْ فِي السَّرْدِ. Qaddir is to like balance or to arrange. And then the sard is basically the links in the chain. وَعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا. And do good deeds. So again, the physical or the worldly, and then the spiritual. وَعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا. Use this technology to do good works. إِنِّي بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. I am seeing everything that you are doing. And so this is a very beautiful series of verses that describe the importance of Muslims to be cognizant and conscious of this fadl. We often look at technological advancement as what? Shaitan, evil, destroying humanity. Oh, back in my day, we used to not have these chat GPTs and Googles. I had to go to the library and actually look up the books, etc., right? This nostalgia of the past and this putting down of technology. Muslims love to do that for some reason. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is describing technological advancement and saying that this is fadl from Allah, for you to be grateful. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, be detail oriented with it, be specific with it. Like, I have made it easy for you, so do what is going to be useful for mankind. وَاعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا, and make sure you use it for that which is beneficial, for that which is spiritually beneficial, for righteousness, for that which is morally upright and ethically upright. So our approach to technology should be from a place of gratitude and recognizing it's not coming from XYZ inventor from his mind, but rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that inspires people with these ideas that then brings forth humanity and makes our lives easy. And the ease that comes with technology shouldn't be seen as something evil, but rather should be seen as the rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, the AC in here, can you imagine that? SubhanAllah, just something like the AC and the technology that's there, the lights that you see around you, the screens in front of you, right? This is an example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making it easy for us, and then we're ensuring that we're using it in a strategic way and in an ethical way. And that's one of the things that's really important in the way in which Muslims should use technology versus the way other people use it. Other people will use technology without any thought of ethics, without any thought of its impact on environment, without any thought on its impact on society, on the family. And so the problem is not the technology itself, it's what are you doing with that technology? Are you trying to continue to serve your desires without any thought of ethics? Or are you looking to actually make this world better? And are you putting effort into what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you with? And so artificial intelligence is one of those new technologies that, of course, is becoming a part of our lives. And it's one of those things that the ethic of it is still up for open debate. And I think Muslims should certainly be at the forefront of guiding discussions of ethical use of artificial intelligence, writing papers about it, discussing what the uses of AI should be for the benefit of humanity, what the guardrails should be. This is an open discussion that people are having at the moment. Muslims need to get ahead of it. Muslims need to be the people with revelation, people with ethic. One of the few civilizations that are left that are holding on to a sense of Abrahamic morality and ethic and a sense of revelation-based morality. We should be part of that conversation of the way in which the direction of technology, The next verse. وَلِسُلَيْمَانِ الرِّيحَ غُدُوُّهَا شَهْرٌ وَرَوَاحُهَا شَهْرٌ وَأَسَلْنَا لَهُ عَيْنَ الْقِطْرِ. So now here, Sulaiman alayhi salam is describing mobility here. How quickly Sulaiman alayhi salam is able to move. One evening, a month's journey. One day, a month's journey. And so again, we reflect on our own technologies and the ease of which we are able to travel despite the fact that there are long distances, the commutes we're able to do, the ways in which we're able to visit family from back home. If we just want to stay on the dime, I'm going to catch the next flight over to wherever it is overseas. How small the world has become, this is part of the technology from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here it's a miracle. But of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made these miracles a blessing for you. Think about that. This is a miracle to Sulaiman alayhi salam. A month's journey in a day. We can actually experience that and fly on a plane. Can you believe that? Literally as the winds are going forward. And all the different ways in which we can manipulate, materials and those who are in materials engineering and understanding all the different ways in which we're able to utilize it for benefit. Realize the miracles Allah gave to one generation is your everyday. وَمِنَ الْجِنِّ مَنْ يَعْمَلُ بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِ وَمَنْ يَزِغْ مِنْهُمْ عَنْ أَمْرِنَا نُذِقُهُ مِنْ عَذَابِ السَّعِيرِ. And from the jinn, those who would work by the permission of his Lord, and whoever deviated from that command, then they would basically be hit with a punishment. And the Mufassirun, they differ. Is Allah referring to a punishment in the next life or this life? And it seems like it's referring to a punishment in this life, and that's what kept them in order. So, Sulaiman alayhi salam has these miracles. he has these jinn that are working at his command. And so, يعملون له ما يشاء من محاريب وتماثيل وجفال كالجواب وقدور الراسيات. So Allah is mentioning the things that the jinn helped Sulaiman alayhi salam make. All these different things. And by the way, the Bible doesn't mention this. The Old Testament doesn't mention the fact that he had control of the jinn. There is a book called the Testament of Solomon, but it's dated after the Quran. So it's unclear whether the Quran actually influenced what was mentioned there, or if it was before. And it mentions a ring, the ring of Solomon. That's not mentioned in the Old Testament. It's not mentioned there, but it's mentioned in this tablet, in this later writing, and it's unclear because actually a lot of the prophet stories that are in the corpus of the Jewish and the Christian literature, a lot of it is actually influenced by the Quran, especially in Andalus and in these different places where there was this engagement. So the way the Quran told the story ends up in the way that the Jewish people started to tell their story as well. In any case, that's mentioned there so much later, not actually in the Old Testament. So it's mentioned here, desired sanctuary. So that's the maharib, so temples. And so this is referencing, of course, the building of Masjid al-Aqsa as well. The building of Masjid al-Aqsa as well. Watamathil, statues. So statues were made. Al-Alusi, rahimahullah, mentions here that it appears to be the case that this was not haram in that sharia to make kind of 3D statues. Obviously in our sharia that's something that's haram. And that's a whole different discussion about taswir and what you're able to show of pictures, depictions I should say, of living organisms. And there's a range of opinions here, from the most strict to those that are a bit more lenient. The more lenient one is the Maliki position that makes a distinction between the taswir, or the image, the dhil that has a shadow, and the one that doesn't have a shadow, meaning a 3D object versus a 2D object. And the 2D objects are not considered within this prohibition according to the more lenient positions. So if it's like 2D, then that's not what's being described. It's being described as a 3D object. And the most lenient, which very few people had, minority, is that it only refers to idols. So statues that are built, 3D objects that are built for the purpose of worshipping them. Just a few of the ulama had this position. In any case, that's not time for this, but that's just the breath from the tradition. So they also built statues. وَجِفَانٍ كَالْجَوَابِ وَقُلُوا الرَّاسِيَاتِ. And اعملوا آل داود شكرا. And that's the key lesson here. You've got this technology at your disposal. You've got the materials, you've got jinn working for you, you've got literally the entire technology open, available for you, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so work, family of Dawood, with gratitude. And this is a lesson we need to have and bring to us as well. When there's new advancements, the next iPhone update, the next phone that comes out, we have to understand this is fadl from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding us with that, with the ease that comes with that technology, work hard in gratitude. What you're able to do for the sake of Islam, what you're able to do for Gaza, what you're able to do for the Muslims, for the Ummah, it's about using that technology for what is good. وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. And few are those of our servants who will be grateful. وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. فلما قضينا عليه الموت ما دلهم على موته إلا دابة الأرض تأكل من سأته فلما خر تبينت الجن أن لو كانوا يعلمون الغيب ما لبثوا في العذاب المهين. When we decreed Sulaiman alayhi salam to die, nothing indicated to the jinn that he was dead, except that dabbatul ard, basically insects from the earth, were eating away at his staff, and then he collapsed. And the jinn realized that if they had really known the unseen, they wouldn't have remained in such humiliating servitude. So, this is the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam in Surah Saba. Now, what you should know about with Sulaiman alayhi salam, who inherited the kingdom of Dawood alayhi salam, expanded that kingdom. There's a story, of course, of Bilqis, the queen of Sheba, and there's other stories as well that show the magnificence of Sulaiman alayhi salam's kingdom. But the point that's important for us at this stage is this whole discussion about the jinn that were working for him. The jinn that were working for Sulaiman alayhi salam. And when you look into the books of tafsir, it appears that there was interaction between the humans and the jinn, because they're there and they're working And so at that time, the jinn and the humans had some level of interaction in the kingdom of Sulaiman alayhi salam. And this is one of the specialities of Sulaiman alayhi salam. So they're talking, and the jinn, just to explain in brief context to the last verse there, the jinn start to brag to the humans. We have knowledge of the unseen. Like they start to big themselves up, right? Because some people say that the jinn have an inferiority complex to humans. So now they're interacting, and so then they're overcompensating, say, yeah, well, you know, we have, if the brothers, inshallah, can move forward, inshallah, so there's people just sitting in the back over there, if we can just move forward here, and then the brothers in the back are able to come through. Jazakum khairan. So, what was I saying? Yeah, they have an inferiority complex, and so they're saying, we've got knowledge of the unseen. We go up into the sky, and we hear the malul a'la, we can hear the angels discussing the decree, and we can tell you what's going to happen the next day. And so that is one of the reasons, and the humans were impressed by this. And it also attracted them to say, okay, well, we need to have this relationship with the jinn because they have this knowledge of the unseen. So that explains this last verse here about why Allah made Sulaiman's death in this way. So it appears that for whatever reason, the jinn, in their perception of this world, is not a very strong perception. So they're working, and Sulaiman alayhi salam, it is said in the books of tafsir, he was actually praying. So then he started to pray, and he had his staff there, and mid-prayer he passes away, and he's leaning on his staff. And the jinn had no idea, and they said it was for a year, an entire year. 1 year they're working and working and working, and they had no thought and idea that Sulaiman alayhi salam had actually died. And then finally, when it falls over and he falls over, they say, oh my God, he's actually dead. Then it became clear, and everyone said, you guys think that you know the ghaib, you don't even know the scene, the person that's clearly dead. So how can you say that you have knowledge of the ghaib? So this was a way to dissociate their, I guess, their amazement with the jinn. So the jinn and the humans are there, and the jinn are seeing incredible things being done by Sulaiman alayhi salam through the handiwork of the jinn, because the jinn were under the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that to Sulaiman alayhi salam. So Sulaiman alayhi salam passes away. This is also not mentioned in the Old Testament, but the Quran fills in the blanks for us. There's a very famous verse here in Surah Baqarah. You guys know this verse? وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. And they, meaning the Bani Israel, وَاتَّبَعُوا, and they followed, meaning the Bani Israel, مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينَ, what the shayateen recited, عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ, during the reign of Sulaiman alayhi salam. So of the jinn that were subjugated, because we understand there are jinn that are believers, then there are jinn that are disbelievers, and there are jinn that are shayateen, right? What is it that makes a jinn a shaitan? It's the same thing that makes a human a shaitan. Any person that is working to lead people away from Tawheed and from the message of the prophets, they are shayateen. So, the shayateen there are reciting something. Allah is mentioning here, tatlu shayateen, they're reciting something. And the Bani Israel is following this. وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ, and Sulaiman did not disbelieve. وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ. But it was the shayateen that disbelieved who taught mankind, or the people there, sihr. They taught the Bani Israel black magic. We'll pause it there, okay? Now, so the jinn who were there amongst Sulaiman alayhi salam, they were teaching the human beings. How did this occur? You look into the books of tafsir, there are different things that happened. And why is Allah saying, وَمَا كَفَرَ Sulaiman? Sulaiman didn't disbelieve. He is actually exonerating Sulaiman alayhi salam. So the sabab al-nuzul for this ayah is that the Bani Israel were debating with the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, you're mentioning Sulaiman as a prophet of God? Don't you know that he was a sahir? He was a sorcerer? And so this scene, it's not in the Old Testament, but as I said, in some of the later things that came after, it was mentioned that Sulaiman basically taught Bani Israel black magic. We're going to get to why that is the case in a moment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exonerates Sulaiman alayhi salam. And what's mentioned as to, well then, why was there this confusion? There are different positions. Ibn al-Jawzi mentions six positions, but they all have to do with the shayateen framing Sulaiman. They framed Sulaiman. How did they frame Sulaiman? Different ways. Not in different ways, there's different opinions as to how they framed him. They framed him one way. So what is that? After Sulaiman, when Sulaiman would leave his throne, they would write in a book that was there, and then they closed the book and they buried it underneath his throne. And in this book is all about how to do black magic, how to control the jinn, and how to do different things with black magic. And so they did this. Now, the next, so when he dies, the shayateen bring this book out, the jinn, and say, look, this was the book from Sulaiman. This is how he was controlling all of us. Even though Sulaiman didn't do sihr, what was Sulaiman's control of the jinn? It was not through black magic, it was through tawheed. Allah was the one who gave it. It was dua and ibadah that resulted in this, and it was a special miracle only for him. It wasn't something universal for anyone else. It wasn't meant for other people to start to use this. It was just for Sulaiman alayhi salam, and it was through tawheed, not through shirk, which is what black magic is. And so this is one of the ways that they framed him. Another way is that there was a book of commands that Sulaiman actually had, and he buried it underneath his throne, and the shayateen took it out, and in between each line, they wrote their spells and incantations and everything like this, and said, hey, this is how he controlled us. And another one is that the shayateen actually wrote a book of sihr, and this one seems to actually fit with the verse a bit more, where the shayateen, the jinn they're like, okay, we're gonna turn people away, and the Bani Israel, we're making them impressed, we're telling them we know the ghaib, and we're gonna write down for them how they can invoke us, how we're going to help them later on, etc., without tawheed. Sulaiman seizes it, and buries it underneath his throne, so no one will be the wiser and see it. Then once Sulaiman alayhi salam dies, the shayateen take it out and say, this is from Sulaiman alayhi salam, this is how he controlled us. The reason why this makes sense is because it's mentioned here, مَا تَتْلُ الشَّيَاطِينَ, what the shayateen were reciting, عَلَى مُلْكِ Sulaiman, during the kingdom of Sulaiman. So it's not after he died, it's during the kingdom of Sulaiman. It seemed like they were trying to teach the sihr, and Sulaiman alayhi salam put an end to it. But then they framed Sulaiman alayhi salam here, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exonerates him here. وَمَا كَفَرَ Sulaiman. Sulaiman did not reject faith. After he died then, these shayateen and these jinn, they are then teaching the Bani Israel their sihr, how to invoke them. And it's shirk, it's not through tawheed, right? It's shirk. What is sihr? What is black magic? The essence of black magic is you do different things of service to this entity that you call upon, and that entity then does different things for you. And we're going to get into details in a bit. I'm going to pause there. Any questions at this point in time? Are we all clear, or that's clear what's going on? Okay. Now, more black magic started to be taught to the Bani Israel even afterwards, and that's what's referenced here. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. So it's saying, and what was sent down upon the two angels in Babylon. So this is much later. So to be clear, so does everyone know where Babylon is? So you can see here, this area is Babylon, okay? This area here is Babylon. So where is the kingdom of Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman? It's here, right? It's saying it's here. It's like basically this large area here. So anyways, that crumbles down. Sulaiman alayhi salam, after Sulaiman alayhi salam passes away, then it basically crumbles. It divides into the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, and two different kingdoms. Prophets are sent. And then Nebuchadnezzar comes from Babylon and basically takes over. And so now they are in exile. A lot of them are exiled to Babylon. And so Bani Israel is in Babylon now. So in Babylon, these two angels come and they start to teach people black magic, sihr. So that's why this verse says, وَاتَّبَعُوا, they followed two things. The shayateen during the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam and taught them some black magic. And number two was Harut and Marut. So two different areas in which black magic came into the Bani Israel. And they learned it. Now what's so fascinating here is that what is learned exactly? وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَ إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ وَلَا تَكْفُرْ فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. So this is the disclaimer, the trigger warning that the angels came with. the rated R, not for any believers to take for what we're going to be speaking about. And then فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. What did they teach? What was the impact of the sihr that they're learning? How to destroy families. How to destroy families, the family unit, right? مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. We often think about this on an individual level, but think about it from this point of view. This whole real ring of people who are interested in this, they're interested in breaking up families and destroying the family unit. And it's interesting to note the state that we're in at the moment, where everyone's constantly complaining about the breakdown of the family unit. The breakdown of the family unit. I'm not saying that that's all from sihr. What I'm saying is that the goals are aligned on both ends. Or the outcome, I should say, is the same. وَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مَا يُضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُم. In any case. So those are the two different ways in which black magic is coming in here. And it goes back to them thinking that Sulaiman alayhi salam controlled these jinn, and so therefore that's something for us to do as well. Now, it should be noted that the prophets of the Bani Israel made it very clear that this is completely haram, it is shirk, it is idolatry, there is not to be any sorcerers or witches. This is in the Bible as well. So there was clear commands from the prophets that came after not to engage in any of this type of behavior. But there always remained this kind of secret, occult group of people that took from this and were a bit eclectic and were not from the mainstream of the Judaism, of the Judeo movement of Bani Israel and all the prophets, and they continued this kind of tradition of this sort of black magic and dark arts. There is then basically there were these esoteric mystical movements as well that started to go in, these spiritual movements, and they basically merged with this, where they would have these incantations and spells and whatnot, stuff handed down from what we're talking about here, up until now. So in the 13th and the 12th century, there was the Kabbalah movement, which is basically a Jewish mystic movement, and they're basically like esoteric kind of people who are focused more on different spiritual states and visions and that sort of thing. But underlying there is this kind of continuum, you can say, of this idea of people coming forward in demonology and these things being written down in these different books and whatnot. But this is the source and this is where it comes from. And as we said, at its root, it's about having to worship basically the shaitan. Having to worship the shaitan in order to bring about whatever it is that is here. So, the next surah after Surah Saba is which one? Surah Fatir, right? So the next verse here in Surah Fatir, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا إِنَّمَا يَدْعُو حِزْبَهُ لِيَكُونُوا مِنْ أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. Indeed, shaitan is an enemy to you, so take him as an enemy. He only invites his party to be among the companions of the blaze. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making it clear here that shaitan is an enemy. Take him as an enemy. He's calling you to the fire. Don't give in to the temptations of the shaitan. The next surah is which one? Surah Yasin. Surah Yasin. There's a weak hadith that mentions that Surah Yasin is the heart of the Quran. And it's a surah that's very dear and near to many people for different reasons. And in this surah, the stream of the focus on the shaitan is kept. So you see here, Alam ahad ilaykum ya bani Adam, O Bani Adam, O humanity, Allah ta'budu shaitan. Did I not take a covenant from you all that you would not worship the shaitan? Innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. Now, you're looking at these verses and you're thinking, yeah, like it's mentioned before, yeah, shaitan is trying to call you to the fire, to destruction. Here, I took this covenant, don't worship the shaitan. Like there's a lot of prohibitions in the Quran that make sense, like, okay, yeah, don't do this because people do this. But you're like, who in their right mind would want to worship the shaitan? And this needs to be understood in light of what we spoke about earlier, of the idea of this whole world in which satanic worship and rituals are normalized in order to achieve some level of power influence over the world. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning this here again to all of humanity, right? Allah ta'budu shaitan. I took this covenant. Do not worship the shaitan. Then we come to Surah Safat. And Surah Safat is a very interesting surah. Surah Safat, as you see in your books, it's mentioned, Allah helps the forces of good to triumph over the forces of evil. And if you look at the organization of Surah Safat, I should really put this up on the screen, but anyways, if you look at this, the organization, the first part, ayah 1 to ayah 10, is the unseen realm, the angelic forces prevails over the demonic forces. You see, who are the wasafati safa? These are the angels. Fazajrati zajra fataliyati dhikra. These are the angels that Allah is mentioning. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references the shayateen. وَحِفْظًا مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْطَانٍ مَارِدٍ, referring to the stars that are decorating the lowest heaven. لَا يَسَّمَّعُونَ إِلَى الْمَلَإِ الْأَعْلَى وَيُقْذَفُونَ مِنْ كُلِّ جَانِبٍ. They may not listen to the exalted assembly of angels. Remember how they were claiming that they could hear the ghaib? Except that they're pelted from each side. That's why they only get a little glimpse here or there, and that's why they fill in the gaps with their own lies. And so Allah is mentioning here from ayah 1 to 10, the angelic forces always overcome the demonic forces. The next, from ayah 11 to 74, Allah describes the realm of the hereafter. So the first one is the unseen realm. Angelic forces prevail over demonic forces. The next section is the hereafter realm. The sincere believers will prevail over the disbelievers. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then describes the conversation between the people of paradise here. And describes the discussion of the people as well, of hellfire, the conversations that are there as well. And so the hereafter realm, the sincere believers prevail over the disbelievers. Now, from ayah 75 to ayah 148, it goes to the worldly realm. So unseen realm, hereafter realm. Now we're talking about the worldly realm. The prophets of Allah prevail over their enemies. The prophets of Allah always prevail over those who reject them. Then the next part is refuting pagan mythology of angelic and demonic divinity. Then the last section, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ will prevail over his enemies. So Surah Safat is a beautiful surah, by the way. It's a beautiful surah, and it has this surah and this message of hope that's there. That the party of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will eventually prevail. And so it's mentioned the unseen realm, the hereafter realm, the worldly realm, and then it's come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as you can see here. وَلَقَدْ سَبَقَتْ كَلِمَتُنَا لِعِبَادِنَا الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِنَّهُمْ لَهُمُ الْمَنْصُورُونَ وَإِنَّ جُنْدَنَا لَهُمُ الْغَالِبُونَ فَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ حَتَّى حِينٍ وَبْصِرْ فَسَوْفَ يُبْصِرُونَ. And our word has already proceeded for our servants, the messengers, that indeed they would be those given victory. And indeed our soldiers would be those who overcome. So, Ya Muhammad, leave them for a time and see what will befall them, for they're going to see. Then for our punishment, are they impatient? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends it with the very famous verse, Jazakumullah khairan. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Salam meaning safety, security on the messengers. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. So this is Surah Al-Safat that's mentioning this. Now Surah Al-Safat also mentions this struggle between the shayateen and the angels, and the fact that the angels will always overcome, and the forces of good always eventually then overcome the forces of evil. The forces of evil. So we come to one particular story here in Surah Safat, and this is, we start from 102. It's the story of Ilyas that we're going to come to, that's going to connect everything together. But first, it's interesting that before we get to the story of the sacrifice of Ismail or Ishaq alayhimus salam, there's ikhtilaf amongst the ulama which one was the one that was sacrificed. People are surprised to actually hear that. Actually, from the earlier, more Sahaba had the position that it was Ishaq, and then later on it became dominant that it was Ismail alayhi salam. In any case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of Ibrahim and then mentions the story of the sacrifice or the supposed sacrifice of his son. Now here, the dream is seen that he's seeing himself sacrifice his son. Now what needs to be known here is that in pagan polytheistic rituals, this was a very common practice. Very common at that time. Child sacrifices. In particular, first child sacrifices. To appease their God and to give it as an offering. So, what's interesting is that here, Ibrahim a.s. is given this vision, which is, and he's coming from Babylon, which is all pagan and everything like this, and these things are happening all around him. So it's not something far left from him. It's like, oh, this is Allah and he's wanting this. And so, subhanAllah, obviously, to the fitrah, it's something that seems very, horrific. But Ibrahim a.s. displayed a type of tawakkul in Allah that wasn't a physical tawakkul, it was a moral tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah would not command me to do something that's harmful to me or my child. And so he, even though it seemed like that is going to be harmful, he went and he did it full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed through this that Allah does not want or intend any child sacrifices. That this pagan polytheistic practice is not part of the Abrahamic millah, the millah to Ibrahim. It was completely removed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ, and we ransomed him with a great sacrifice. بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ, meaning the ram that was then meant to be sacrificed, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the sacrifice here is the sacrifice that's actually for your own benefit. And that's what sacrificing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means. You don't sacrifice in a way that actually harms you at the end of the day. When you sacrifice for Allah, it benefits you. When you do the sacrifice for Eid al-Adha, who's benefiting? You are. You're eating the food, right? And the poor people around you are benefiting, right? And your family is benefiting, right? This sacrifice is not absurd, irrational, and harmful for no reason. Killing, innocent children. No. It's taking this concept of sacrifice and it's putting it in the right direction, which is toward the wildlife that Allah has created and intended as service for humanity, to nourish our souls and our body so that we can i'malu ala Dawood shukra, so that we can act with gratitude. You realize that, and it's a sacrifice. You realize who's the one that's really sacrificing. I mean, it's you and your wealth, but the animal itself. The animal itself is sacrificing itself. For who? For the believers. Why? Because that energy that it spent its whole life accruing through grazing and eating its grass and all this stuff, and the energy that it built up, that one day a believer would eat from me, and that my meat and my protein and my fats would then become the very substance by which this believer worships and prostrates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are meant to have this spiritual connection to the concept of dhabiha and halal meat and these sorts of things, realizing that this was a sacrifice, dhibhan azim, and it's something that benefits us, and it's within the order of nature. So after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets that straight, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of, he mentions in passing, not stories, he'll just mention some names in passing, Musa and Harun alayhi salam. Then he mentions the story of Ilyas very briefly. وَإِنَّ إِلْيَاسَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And Elias or Elijah, both are okay, and both are mentioned in the Old Testament. Elijah as a prophet. And the Quran is referencing a story that's found there in the Old Testament at the moment. وَإِنَّ إِلْيَاسَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لِقَوْمِهِ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ. When he said to his people, will you not fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now, who is Ilyas's people?
Bani Israel.
The Bani Israel. Now what happened at this point? So he's after Sulaiman alayhi salam. There's been this fracture within Bani Israel. What happened was, the Canaanites by the sea, they worshipped a god named Baal. And Baal was a storm god that they thought was responsible for bringing rain and allowing the vegetation to grow. And so the Bani Israel is seeing this, and they're impressed by how much fertility is in that land. They don't attribute it to Allah, they attribute it to Baal, as these people are. And many of the Bani Israel are taken by this, and they start to worship Baal as well. So they're worshipping Baal, and they have the concept of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well, but Baal is in their focus now. So Ilyas is there. Now, at this point in time, his name is, in the Bible, his name is King Ahab. He is from the Bani Israel, and he's the one that sanctioned and made a temple for Baal and all this stuff. So he became all these Baal worshippers. Now, Baal would ask for child sacrifices. Oh, sorry. They would do, Baal is a fictitious entity, but they would do child sacrifices to appease this idol Baal. And they would do these blood rituals and these sorts of things. And it has also been uncovered that they would also perform different, there's kids here, but basically intimacy sort of things, sexual sort of cults that they would form, because they wanted basically Baal and this other goddess that they had that was named Shera something, and basically they wanted them to be together essentially, because they thought this would bring fertility, and so that's why they would do their weird kind of rituals. It wasn't about a pure lust and desire, but it was about this weird shirky kind of zina mix, and this is basically what they would do, these rituals, these types of rituals. Who do you think is inspiring this? The shayateen, right? Shayateens have a field day with these guys, right? So like, this is very much tied to very much satanic type, ideas and whatnot, killing babies and these sorts of things. So this is Baal. By the way, this stuff about Baal and about him being the fertility god and the one that brings forth the rain and creates all the vegetation, this is not found in the Old Testament. This is found in a tablet that they uncovered in the 1920s. And it was a tablet that was there written in ancient script, and basically they decoded it, and they found it was like 2-3 like tablets that would come together as like a book, basically all about Baal and all about the cult of Baal. And so this is not in the Old Testament about who Baal is and all these different sacrifices and whatnot, but it's found there of what they used to do. What's interesting is that the Quran references what they used to believe about Baal, even though this information was lost during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, in a very subtle way. And we've been coming through, how many times we've gone through Prophet stories and we've mentioned all these examples. It's something that's so beautiful as a part of a feature of the miracle of the Quran. أَتَدْعُونَ بَعْلًا, do you call upon Baal, وَتَذَرُونَ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ, and you leave off the greatest of creators. Not وَتَذُرُونَ Allah as you'd expect, but Allah specifically mentions here Ahsan al-Khaliqeen. What does that mean? And Ahsan is a superlative, comparative term, right? What does that mean? That means that this was a rival, creative God to them. This was knowledge completely lost, but it was just recently uncovered in a language that was obviously lost at the time as well. That was just, and obviously the Prophet didn't read or write Arabic to begin with, let alone other languages, let alone lost languages, let alone have access to this type of information. So a beautiful way in which this is described in the Quran, the da'wah of Ilyas, and this da'wah, this point here is not mentioned anywhere in the da'wah in the Old Testament. So it's not like, he just copied from the Old Testament. This phrase is not mentioned anywhere in the Old Testament in the story of Ilyas, which is mentioned in quite some detail. This phrase is not mentioned anywhere. Allah Rabbakum wa Rabba Abaikum al-Awwaleen. This is referenced in the Old Testament as well. He says, the Lord of Abraham, the Lord of Isaac, the Lord of Jacob. فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَإِنَّهُمْ لَمُحْضَرُونَ. They denied him, and so then they were basically exposed, and then they were punished. So there were these Baal worshippers. This is the things that they were doing over there. And basically what happened was Ilyas challenged them to a duel and said, okay, this is from the Old Testament, so just with a grain of salt, it's not from the Quran. But he said, okay, you bring forth a ram sacrifice and put it on the altar, and you call upon Baal, And if fire comes from the heavens and burns it, then we'll follow you. And I will do it, and I will call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if that happens, then you will follow me. And they said, okay, deal. And so they did it, and the whole day they're calling upon Baal, nothing's coming, and then he's taunting them. Ilyas in the Old Testament is taunting. He's like, oh, maybe he can't hear you, maybe speak louder. And they're screaming. He said, maybe he's taking a nap, you need to wake him up. Maybe he's traveling. He's just totally taunting him, trash talking him basically. Then the next day, he just calls upon Allah, and then the fire then comes from the sky, and it eats it up completely. Now this is not mentioned here, but this is referenced actually in Surah Ali Imran. It's referenced in Surah Ali Imran. This is referenced when the Bani Israel is demanding for a miracle, bring us a qurban, ta'kuluhun nar, that will be eaten by fire. So you might think, where did they get this from? They're getting it from this story. So they're coming up with these stories and saying, oh, why can't the Prophet ﷺ bring this here and there? So then it seems like this did happen, perhaps, because it's referenced there in Surah Al Imran, but not referenced as a story, but referenced as a challenge. In any case, so after that, basically, even though it was made clear, they all kind of submitted to Allah, but then afterwards the wife comes, Ahab comes and says, we're going to kill Ilyas. He flees. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroys them, and it continues onwards from there. So Baal basically is fallen from this idea of God, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically, and their belief takes it over. But Baal becomes a demon, essentially, in the collective imagination of the people in that area, and from the Bani Israel and from the Christians as well. So he's written as a demon at this point in time now, like later on. That Baal was this god, but now he's become this demon from the underworld. But the same sort of rituals that are done, Baal in particular is the one that wants the child sacrifice. And it's interesting because the story right before this is Ibrahim alayhi salam's, the child sacrifice that was removed. Then after that, the story of Ilyas and Baal, which is mentioned by name, which is also not something that is common in the Quran, for the Quran to mention the name of the idols. So, how do we get to where we are here now? As we said, there is this undercurrent of this kind of occultic practices of sihr that have continued up until this point in time. In fact, you'll see here, there was the Prime Minister of Israel in 1995. 1995 was a important date for the Israelis because, or the Jewish people I should say, because it was the 3,000 year anniversary of the conquering of Dawood alayhi salam, defeating the Goliath essentially. So they had a whole festival in Israel. And the Prime Minister in 1995, he came out, and the Prime Minister basically said, this is a time where we need to start coming together, we need to start bringing religions together here, we need to stop fighting, we need to give land back, and we need to live in harmony. Just like how it was so no conflict and stuff during the kingdom of Dawood. These people here that you see, is actually a picture of them doing this. They literally engaged in sihr, in a spell called the Pulsa de Nura. The Pulsa de Nura, which is a spell in which they invoke what they call the angels of destruction, to basically remove all protection from the person, so the consequences of the sin of that person reach them, and they basically will just die and be harmed from there. That's the idea of the Pulsa de Nura. So they literally did this, and then a few days later, he was killed. And so the sihr is being used here to influence global events, policy, punish people for speaking in a way that certain people don't like. And it's all documented, by the way. In fact, in his biography, it's mentioned this curse that was put on him by these people from the sihr. Now, as we said, they're claiming that they're calling out to the angels of destruction. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains in the Quran, again, it's so beautiful how Allah, the answers are there for us. The holes that are left there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran fills it. So they're claiming they're calling out to the angel, which is shirk already, because they're not calling to Allah, they're calling to the angels. But Allah will ask the angels, did you ask them to worship you? And the angels will say, they never worshipped us. كَانُوا يَعْبُدُونَ الْجِنِّ. They used to worship the jinn, not us. And so these names that they think are angels of the destruction, these are the jinns that are there from that time, coming echoes from Harut and Marut, from the shayateen of Sulaiman alayhi salam's time. And these things are still within them, these books and spells and whatnot, the remnants of them are still there. And they're still being used to this day. This is 1995. This is 1995. Now, there's a few very interesting, I didn't put it up here. There's a few very interesting videos. Okay, we're running out of time as well. I'll just tell you what was mentioned by these videos. But basically, there are groups of people that engage in sorcery and black magic and all these things, and openly they'll do this. There were 2 interviews that I found that were very interesting. One interview, it went viral actually, this one. It was this Russian witch, basically, who said that out of all the religions, Islam and the Muslims are the hardest to influence and affect with my magic. It seems like there's a dome around them. And she said that they connect with their egregore. This is like an esoteric term to describe an entity that a group of people all believe in, and basically collectively their imagination brings it some power. That's the way they understand it. So they said, oh, they connect with this 5 times a day, and so there's this dome that protects them from this. There was another one that was interviewed by a Christian, and he was saying to the Christian, we are the left-hand path. We are the left-hand path. That's the way we describe what we do and how we do what we do. And we describe any group of people who believe in a higher God and submit to that God and unify under that God or universal principle, whatever it may be, we call this the right-hand path. The right-hand path. And then he says to this, so the Christian's like, oh, you're lumping us with the Buddhists and the Hindus and the Muslims. He's like, well, he said, Islam, out of all of them, is the most radical right-hand path. And it's so interesting, the idea even of the fact that we use our right hand and left hand. Like, we don't understand the hikmah behind some of these things and what we're being protected from. But from the testimony of these people, and wallahu ta'ala alam, if they're just full of baloney, or if they're actually engaged in these types of things, it's interesting, the fact that they both have nothing to do with Muslims and Islam, but they'll specifically mention Muslims and Islam as, yes, this is a problem and whatnot. And you'll find on Reddit these little channels of people trying to send hexes and that sort of thing. And they will say, in some of these like hex channels, every time I try to send hexes to the Muslim world, I get massive migraines for like the next days and stuff like this. Again, wallahu ta'ala alam, they're not definitive, not qat'i, but the point that I bring them forward is because this is an element that we've been taught since we were kids. No reasonable person believes it. Nobody does this anymore. This is backward, regressive stuff from the Stone Ages. Sihr and black magic, no, we're a rational, secular group now, and everything happens in a very rational way. I want to say that that's complete baloney itself. And the fact that, coming to the end here, the fact that now what has been uncovered with the Epstein files in the latest release, which is absolutely shocking, is that there was an email. There were 2 things that were released in this, or I should say 3 aspects here. The first one was, there was an email that was sent from an FBI agent to another FBI agent, quoting a victim's testimony. A victim's testimony who was on the boat, on an Epstein's boat. And she's describing the things that she was witnessing on this boat. And she saw, and it was mentioned here, I'll read it exactly actually. While on this yacht, he witnessed... Okay, I'll skip a few things. He was a victim of a type of... Okay, there's too many kids here. In any case, there was a ritualistic sacrifice that happened. There were very strange things that happened where basically... I don't want to be triggering to young kids or anything like this. But in any case, basically a knife was applied somewhere, but there was no scarring afterwards. It was very bizarre how all these things were happening. And then on the yacht, he witnessed basically... I didn't anticipate all these young people coming through. We advertised this very heavily. I went, oh, this will be a family-friendly one to bring the people to Faith Circle to. Anyways. But basically the stuff we were talking about, I mean, it's really graphic, was discussed, but that's literally exactly the cult of Baal stuff and the child sacrifices, but not just Baal, any polytheistic, pagan, satanic type rituals that they try to achieve this sort of power. Child sacrifices, things being cut, etc., intestines being eaten, blah, 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 was witnessed actually on the boat. And not just that, multiple victims, and these were the girl victims, who were basically become pregnant, they would take, and this was in their diaries that they wrote, and it's written there, it's all in the files now, and it's not being advertised very heavily, this part, in the media. They would take the baby away, this is what they're writing, this 15, 16-year-old, they would take the baby away into a different room, and they had to give birth without any anesthetic. In fact, the woman said that there was an Israeli doctor that came, that helped deliver this baby, no anesthetic, and basically they took the baby away and she could hear their screams in the next door. And basically, most of them were sacrificed essentially as the firstborn, pure, etc., etc. So this was not just a lustful island of like some pedophiles and that sort of thing. This was actually something that was utilized as a method of appeasing whatever god that they're sacrificing for. Now, where does Baal come to this? There was a bank. The bank name of Epstein was basically Baal. It said Baal name, and then it was the West Bank. It was the name of one of the banks. Unclear if this was a typo, if this was Baal himself. But certainly a lot of this stuff fits with this, and certainly with the heritage from his angle as well, and everything like this. So this is something that we need to recognize people are actively still doing on a mass scale to try and influence global politics, to try and influence whatever it is that is happening. There are different ways in which this is coming out. So one of them is in this way, and this whole power elite of everyone coming together. There's harm that will come to those who try to oppose them. Right? And that's what happened here, right? They literally killed the guy and they did the sihr on him. So it's so important for Muslims that are active to have a healthy dose of the morning and evening adhkar and a good amount of ibadah, especially if you're active against this and you're advocating against this. Mental health issues, burnout, depression, fatigue, problems within families, problems within marriage. There are multifactorial, obviously, causes for this. But perhaps one of the major causes of this is these sihr rituals that are being put forward to try and break apart the family unit, to try and make people who are working for the cause become unable to separate in conflict between other Muslims and within the believers and the ranks themselves. So this is something that's really important for us to be cognizant of and to recognize that in our Sharia is a system of protection from the shayateen, from the devils, from these sorts of different things that people are doing. And this is something that's, as you can see, is now on the open. Those who support, this movement are engaged in this type of sihr, which we believe does have an impact and does have an effect. But as we've seen from their own testimonies, Muslims have a leg up on this situation here, and Muslims are the ones that have maintained are the only ones who maintained their civilization, maintained their ethic, maintained their morals. Whereas these are trying to, think about it like this, right? Like, why is this emphasis on child sacrifice, and why does Shaitan want them to do this? Shaitan hates children. Evidence for this, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. As soon as the child's born, what does the Shaitan do? Kicks the child, right? And how evil do you have to be to a newborn to actually want to hurt a newborn child? So the Shaitan gets very happy and excited when newborns, when children are defiled, because it represents the purity of the fitrah that he hates so much, that reminds him of why human beings were given the status over him himself. So children are that reminder for him, and that's why there's that hatred of children that are there, and it seeps into these particular rituals. So with that, inshallah ta'ala, the concluding lesson and the concluding message really with this, oh my God, I forgot to put this on the whole time, the concluding message is that morning and evening adhkar are not optional, guys. Ayatul Kursi every morning, every evening, at least. The 3 quls every morning, every evening, 3 times a day each. Like, this is like, at this point, something that's so important for us to do. We already knew we needed to do this. But these are scenarios that happen. When the Prophet ﷺ, he saw the there was a man that came and apparently saw the Dajjal, and he came and he told this story, and the Prophet became excited and said, "This confirms what I told you." This is one of those moments where what we're learning from the Epstein files and whatever else is going to come out later is confirming what we all knew to begin with, and that is that the shaitan's greatest trick of humanity was that he convinced them that he doesn't exist, and it's important for us to ensure that we keep seeking that protection. And doing morning, evening, adhkar, etc., etc. With that, we'll open it up for question and answers. Let's get to some questions, and then we will get to Salat al-Isha shortly. Maybe we'll send it through. Is Baal a real jinn or a fictitious entity? He's fake.
I think your wife said
I've heard
Sorry?
stories of Baal being an actual.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Can you do that again? Is Baal a real jinn or fictitious? He's a fictitious entity. This
Seer that's done in worshipping Baal.
it's shaitan.
Shaitan. So shaitan is
Shaitan has influenced them exactly.
I've heard weird stories of them giving voices and responding.
The egregore is that idea of the central figure. It's interesting. It's just interesting. It's kind of out of the blue. It's out of nowhere. It's not like a Muslim channel or anything like this. It's actually like a magician's channel. Like, why is she pointing out Islam? And it's not like she's in a Muslim country. See, like he's saying how easy it is for other religions. The genuine iman from the believers. So she's interpreting it as egregore in her magical kind of frame of things as a witch. But obviously that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alhamdulillah. All right. Okay, where am I? Okay, I'm just gonna have to go in order, guys. So, from 7 minutes ago, Meta supports Israel. Does that mean I should delete WhatsApp? Look, I mean, when it comes to boycott, it's about strategic boycott, right? Like, buying products from an entity that is at war with you or that is having a problem is not aslan haram, because the Prophet ﷺ still didn't cause any boycott of the Quraysh while they were in active war. But if can be done in a way that is a part of a strategy to weaken their oppression and that sort of thing, then it should be encouraged and done. But it needs to be strategic. And many people say about you have to do that which is, you always have to do a cost-benefit analysis, right? You delete WhatsApp, you delete everything that has to do with this. You're actually going to become ineffective in a sense. You want to use some of these technologies in a way that's beneficial. Use their platforms, Instagram, Facebook, in a way, break their algorithms. That's what happened in the last two years as well, right? So I think that's important as well. They taught black magic to break up families. Ethnic countries nowadays do a lot of sihr. Can't fathom it being done in a hyper-individual society until now. Yeah, exactly. This was done a lot, in individual families. But here, is this something that's a more general, global sort of phenomenon, like a global spell? Wallahu ta'ala alam. Why does sihr actually work? Sihr actually works because the jinn that Allah has created do have a tangible effect in the world that we see here, just like the angels have a tangible effect in the world that we see here. And there's processes towards that. And Allah has made asbab for that. And it's for us to counteract that. That's the reason. Sorry, I didn't hear properly. Did you say that Baal is fictitious? Is he a jinn or made up a thing? No, he's made up. He's not. He's just a made up dude. Well, he's like they made him into like some bull figure. The one thing I also forgot to mention about the Epstein files is that it was also shown a letter from a UAE lady to Epstein about sending the Kiswa Kaaba cloth to him. And what was very peculiar is the way she described it to him. Not saying, oh, this is from the Kaaba, which is a holy site for the Muslims, and here it is for you. She said, this is a cloth that thousands of worshippers have come and prayed and put all of their hopes and dreams towards. And that's very clear, because when it comes to sihr, they will find sacred objects, and that's an essential part of their spells and whatnot, of what they want. And so exactly, to defile it and all these sorts of things. Well, we don't really care about this because the kiswa cloth means nothing to us anyways. It's just literally a manufacturing from some people putting some gold stuff together. It means nothing to us. So to them, I mean, whatever. Can we assume that Hindus worship jinns because of the idol/statue worship? We can say that the shayateen from the jinn inspired them to create these mythologies, and so they're worshipping these imaginations inspired by them, not necessarily jinns or demons in and of themselves. Why does Allah let this happen? That goes back to the question of why does Allah allow evil to exist and suffering to exist? Is a test. This is test. When people ask this question, why does Allah allow this happen? Like, you can ask that for everything. This world is darul ibtila, it's test. It's a test of good versus evil. So evil is here for us to triumph over. That's why. If you're going more deeper, obviously, into the issue of suffering, especially the people who were suffering under Epstein and that sort of thing, these are things that there are deeper questions to this. It's called theodicy academically. If you're interested, Yaqeen has a good article on this, on the problem of evil. Spiritual Perception also has a good article on this, on the problem of evil. I'd encourage you to look that up. Could Baal be a demon in disguise? Explains the continuum of Satan worshipping. Hadith describes. No, because if you look at where Baal came from, so Baal originally was coming from another god that they had deified, and then Baal basically literally means like Lord. That's literally what it means, and it was basically a figure that they said was responsible for the rain and vegetation, and then they made an image of him. So this is not some demon in disguise. Why do people worship shaitan? Do they actually think Satan will benefit them in some way in the hereafter, or do they knowingly trade hereafter for dunya? They don't necessarily believe in the hereafter. So this is actually a belief that many of the Jewish people have actually dispensed with. Many of the Jewish people don't have a coherent concept of the afterlife. But they have this concept of the occult and the things in which that they can further their agenda in this world. And so oftentimes, people who worship Satan, there's different people amongst them. There are people who believe Satan's actually real, and they said, oh yeah, well this will bring us this power, and then they justify it with Sulaiman alayhi salam and this whole situation. But then there are people who don't actually believe God is real or Satan's like real in a physical sense. But they believe that if we engage in these satanic rituals, our minds and the energy that comes from it brings about positive energy amongst us, and it helps influence the world in this weird type of psychoanalytic way. So they don't actually believe in Satan proper, but they believe that these rituals have an impact on their minds that then bring about some sort of deranged sense of output in the world, if that makes sense. I've always wondered how to view Harut and Marut. Should we dislike them? No. After all, aren't they just angels? Yes, exactly. How do you so that's the idea of they came to test the Bani Israel, and they said, don't listen to us, don't come to us, this is haram knowledge. And then they still came. So it was the test of access. How do you overcome it if you believe someone is doing black magic on you or causing you harm? So preventative is what we've discussed before. Therapeutic is difficult. So dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is paramount. But sometimes the way that the sihr works is they will take a piece of hair from you, and this is from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They will take a hair from you or something of you, and they will basically tie it up and do their voodoo situation, and they may bury it and put it away. And to fully be removed from the grip of that sihr, you actually need to find it and basically recite the 3 quls on it and remove it. And that's actually the sabab and nuzul of the Mu'awwidhatayn that came for the Prophet ﷺ when it was actually from the Bani Israel, a Jewish person that actually did that to the Prophet ﷺ. Again, part of this same kind of tradition here. Now, how do you square this? It's like, wait, what am I supposed to do now if someone has my hair somewhere and it's affecting me? So number one is that only, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran here, وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. So the effect of that sihr, only what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. And so ultimate protection comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make dua, keep doing this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the effect of that neutralized or zero, even if it's there. If the Prophet ﷺ can be affected by sihr, what would you recommend the regular folk to do to stay protected? I at least said this 5 times. Unless you just came in. What did I say, guys?
Evenings and mornings.
Morning evening adhkar, Ayatul Kursi, the three quls. Very good. How can a recent revert who has been vegetarian their whole life due to their past faith reconcile with qurbani? So, as we described earlier, I don't know if the brother was here when we were talking about our view of creation and the idea of the connection we have with the animals. As Muslims, we actually are very similar to vegans in a sense that we believe that nobody can give the right of another to kill another animal. Like, you can't just kill another animal, except if the Creator gives you that sanction. So the only reason why we are allowed to eat that meat is because it's sacrificed for the sake of God, and that's the Creator of that animal. And that is the wisdom and purpose behind this. Now, that's in terms of the sacrifice of the killing of the animal, and this is something that is morally certainly acceptable, and actually it's encouraged for us to do this. And also, of course, the social benefit that comes from qurbani, the poor that are fed with this meat, etc., there's benefit that comes from it. Now, if it comes to the idea of environment and the issue of mass farming and methane and all these things, that's a different situation, and there can be a case to be made if a person wants to do this from an environmental point of view in modern day farming, but it's certainly not something haram. Ayah 112, after the sacrifice story, says, we gave the news of Ishaq, therefore Ismail alayhi was the sacrifice. Okay, I'm glad you've settled that 1400-year debate with that Slido comment. Show us the video. Oh, we've already seen it. Is Baal a real, okay, we did it. Is similar words of as-safat, as-safinat al-jihad? No. Can the TV and music be used as mediums for black magic? Look, I'm not a black magician. So honestly, la adri, I don't know. Can't pretend like, no, you don't use TV and music. Allah alam. But we know that the music industry and different media are used to influence people 100%. If you want to call that black magic or whatnot, there's certainly a clear psychological point there and a clear psychological operation that's done there. With TV and music, and these are the instruments of the shayateen. We talked about this when we talked about Surah Luqman as well. The shayateen, they use instruments and music to bring people towards their messaging. Interesting fact that there's a name called Baal back in Lebanon. It's from Baal. That's the point. It is from this. It's the same concept. Have you heard about Epstein requesting a cow? Yes. What if my husband is more sassy than me? How can we actually do anti-magic on these evil people like ruqya? Can we exorcise them? Anti-magic on these evil people like ruqya? Yeah. You're saying going back towards them. So as you saw, that woman gets pulled away, at least she said that, she gets pulled away when they try to attack Muslims. If you have that force field around you fueled by your ibadah, then that is enough of a way that they are getting harmed in return back. There was a statement from the Salaf, they used to say that a shaitan would come to them with a black eye. He said, what happened to you? He said, I tried to influence this person, but then I was met basically with his dua and his prayers and it basically his isti'adha, and it whipped me basically, and I've got this black eye. So you want to have a reputation for being a dangerous dude or a dangerous dudette for the shayateen. You want a bad reputation amongst the shayateen. Like that person is like, don't mess with him. That was Umar radiallahu anh, literally. That's why they would run away from him, because they would physically be hurt. Do they insert sihr in music to influence people? Allah alam. Is sihr common amongst Muslims in the West? Those aren't circles I run in, I'm sorry. How do you get to know a guy without a mahram? You need to go to the sahir. No, I'm just kidding. A'udhu billah. So getting to know someone without a mahram, so this person doesn't have a mahram, I'm assuming. So making sure that the meetings are in public places and you're not alone together, and ensuring that what's being discussed is appropriate and not overly flirtatious. And you need to have your own taqwa guard essentially with this, and you know the difference between flirtation and non-flirtation. But this is something that is fine if people are getting to know each other for the purpose of marriage. As long as I would recommend that the girl should always be involving their wali in whenever they're going and doing any of this stuff. It's so important. It is not necessarily that the guy they have families that they meet, but this is a very important thing, and it's a way that the girl doesn't get taken for a ride. There are so many times the girl gets taken for a ride. They don't involve their family or anything like this. They talk to the dude for like 2-3 years, and the guy just says whatever, ghosts them and moves on. And this girl is like totally invested in everything like this. And then the guy's just like whatever. And you know, that's part of the thing. You want to show that there's some seriousness there. But yeah, public place, not khalwa, and appropriateness, no touching or anything like that. Would you say this protection and dome or protection around Muslims is libas al-taqwa? It's beautiful. I like it. I like it. Is Uncle Shaq's boycotted? Astaghfirullah. Burgers tonight, inshallah, with Uncle Shaq's. Okay. How do you respond to people that use the hadith about obeying Muslim rulers to an extreme, even saying Muslims should not talk about the Epstein file? Oh my God, that was crazy. Okay, we'll end there. Unless there was something that was really important. Is ta'weed a form of sihr? Ta'weed is not, it can be a form of sihr. It depends on what's in the ta'weed. If it's weird things that you can't understand in numbers and letters, then it could be sihr. If it's a Quran, if it's Ayatul Kursi, then obviously that's not sihr. Yeah, the last thing, every accusation that they throw at Muslims that we are called and planning for world domination in our masjids, this is their own evil plan. Yes, every accusation is an admission. Could sleep paralysis be a result of jinn? K-pop demon hunters and labubus. What are labubus?
Google it.
Why'd you? Everyone's like, don't do it, don't do it. It's like these Teletubbies, like.
Baal version.
I haven't seen K-pop Demon Hunters, so I can't make any comment. And that's the first time I've ever seen a labubu.
Needs to get out more.
Look, so yeah, we'll end on that last question, which I think is important. The hadith about obeying the Muslim rulers are very abused by groups of people. So we have to look at the tradition together. There are so many hadith about man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyiru biyadihi. If a person sees an evil, they should change it with their hand. This hadith just goes away now. So there's amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, and then there's the idea of keeping the stability of the of society. But what's very clear, even from the early Muslims and from the companions as well, they rebelled against the Umayyads. Abdul ibn Zubair established the caliphate. Hussein radiallahu an also did so as well. So it's more complex than they would like to assume, these sorts of things. And it's important for us as Muslims here not to fall for that sort of very clear state-sponsored religious propaganda that obviously serves the UAE and the Saudi government. So yes, there was a person, shouldn't listen to this guy, who said, if you are practicing Muslim, you should not talk about the Epstein files because it is unverified, you know, the 4 witnesses aren't there, and all this stuff is craziness. You know, sort of, he didn't say that exactly, but it's the same concept, like, oh, don't talk about it, it's a fitna, blah, blah, blah. This is the time to talk about it, actually, to expose what's happening. That's my time, make it easy. Jazakum khairan, everyone. Barakallah feek. We'll pray Salat al-Isha now, and we'll see you guys. So no class next Thursday, okay? Even if it's not Ramadan.